presented by Awesemo.com. I'm Alex Baker, joined today by Phil Benenson. Phil, how are you doing today?
Great, Alex. How about yourself?
Pretty good. Happy 4th of July to everyone out there. Man, what screams 4th of July? I like some NASCAR racing, right? So, you got any big 4th of July plans other than NASCAR?
Absolutely none. This old man is going to bed at 8 o'clock.
Nice, man. Well, hopefully the fireworks don't wake you up there.
Yeah.
So it's been a while since we got a chat here. Last week we got a double feature with the Pocono races. You predicted it would be boring. How did you end up liking those races?
Oh, like I said in the article Saturday, I would spend my time mowing, and that's exactly what I did. And I'm pretty sure I had more fun mowing my dad's yard than you guys did, who were actually sweating that race. Sunday at the very beginning, I watched the full race Sunday, and Sunday more the very beginning of the race, it was kind of interesting, but then regular Pocono set in with the green flag runs, and then it's nicer, having shorter races. I'd read some comments, some actual like NASCAR beat writers, and they've talked about how it was different having shorter races. Because we were talking about 130, 140 laps compared to the typical 160. So, you had shorter races, which is nicer on the ice. But what it introduced to us was basically who was up front in the last segment and who was going to have the better pit stop. And that's exactly who determined the winner in both Saturday and Sunday. So, quite frankly, hopefully this doubleheader and this nonsense about having 4 Pocono races in 2 days shows people just, the racing at this track is not good. And if you watched the truck race on Sunday morning, you saw that those kids had no business being there. They were constantly wrecking into each other. The Xfinity race really wasn't much better. If you played Chase Briscoe in the Xfinity race, you lucked out because he spun himself out with the lead and should have finished in the teens. But basically, everybody in front of him said, "Let's just pull over the side and let Chase go," and that's exactly what they did. Chase got up there and ended up beating Chastain I believe it was Chastain for the win. And then the Cup race, it was Denny had a better pit stop than Kevin, and Kevin won. So maybe NASCAR will get some input from its fans saying, "Hey, please don't do this again. Pocono just needs one race, and if we're going to give it a race, let's add in the road course just for added benefit." But sadly, we go from a long wide track to another long wide track this weekend with Indianapolis.
Yeah, so today we have the Xfinity road course. So that's going to be an interesting one. I have projections. I'll post it up on the site for that, and I'll have the ownership up after the show. And then tomorrow we got the Big Machine 400, of course. But first I want to talk about our sponsor, SuperDraft. SuperDraft is the new car in the race here in NASCAR DFS. So make sure to check out their NASCAR contests this weekend. And you can get free money using promo code Awesemo10. $10 free on a deposit of 20 or more, or 20 free on 100 or more. So make sure to check out SuperDraft. With the Big Machine vodka. Oh wait, no, it's not vodka this year. It's hand sanitizer. I'm kind of curious if anyone's tried their products. So if you have in the chat, let us know how the Big Machine vodka is. Me and Phil, we are talking before the show about how I've never even seen this thing before. So,
yeah, this is just a shell company somebody's invented to hide their money. I'm
yeah, so it's kind of the Ozarks thing going on here. But let's talk about the racetrack here. It's the same track as the Indy 500. And as you mentioned, it's a long track, 2.5 miles, but not the exciting racing that we see at other long tracks like Talladega and Daytona, more similar to Pocono, from what I understand. So, kind of break down the racetrack for us.
Well, that's essentially it, and this is a point that I beat to death like a dead horse every time I write about Indianapolis. But it's the fact. This track was built over 100 years ago for open wheel racing, not for stock car racing, and it's been pretty evident the last decade that these cars with their setups, it just doesn't produce exciting racing like what you will see. I think they're going to hold the 500 for Indy here in August. You watch that racing. There is passing going on all over the track. What you're going to witness tomorrow is if you don't pass somebody on pit road, you had better pass them into the first/second turn on a green flag start, because other than that, you're not gaining that much position. Last year in this race, Kevin Harvick led over 100 laps from the pole. In fact, let me look. Yeah, 118 laps of the 160 laps. It was the same issue that Pocono had, where you've got a long track with very little banking. It's with that 550 horsepower package, it was going to create that scenario. It did it at Pocono twice, and it happened at Indianapolis just the same. Now we kind of saw that on Saturday, where Eric Almirola started on the pole, and we all doubted Eric Almirola as a potential lap leader. But I mean, the the mere fact was that he's had a good car, he's been improving, and he had clean air. He was able to take advantage of all those things and lead a bunch of laps. Sunday was a bird of a different feather because of the inverted field. Now Kurt Busch, he started in the non-preferred groove, went out initially, led the first 30 or so laps, but and he faded throughout the race and showed that he didn't have quite as good a car as everybody else. But the mere fact is that when he was in clean air, he could easily sail away. So that's what we're expecting in this race tomorrow. Whoever can grab the early momentum, start off with clean air, they're probably going to sail away and just knock off a bunch of dominator points in the process.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like this is the kind of track where one guy can accumulate a lot of the lap slide. Only 160 laps, so not as many this weekend, but still that's going to be significant to get that guy. Almirola, he started at the pole, but he's pretty low owned, so that was pretty interesting. Now, in Sunday's race, we had a bunch of guys kind of move around in between the starting positions and then when the race happened. So a lot of guys went to the back, and we have that this week because Jimmy Johnson, he got COVID, tested positive for COVID, so hopefully he's doing all right there. But Justin Allgaier is replacing him. Now, Johnson was supposed to start in fourth, but because of the driver change, that means Allgaier has to start at the back, but he's being scored from fourth. So, I mean, I don't know if that's going to be really important for DFS, but that's the biggest change that we have. So, what do you expect from Justin Allgaier taking over for Jimmy Johnson here?
Justin has raced plenty of Cup races in the past. He's one of these guys, kind of like Alex Bowman was, where he had raced pretty good in the Xfinity Series back when it was the Nationwide Series. Had gotten a ride with a lower level team on the Cup scene, just practically did nothing, and then came back to the Xfinity Series. Now, since Allgaier has come back, he's got a major sponsor in Brandt, so he'll, as long as he's got that sponsorship, he'll probably always have a ride with JR Motorsports. And Allgaier has been better the last couple of years. He was a guy that you could count on to win a couple of races per season. He's been in a bit of a cold stretch this season, and really going back to last season. But the fact is that Allgaier is a competent driver, and you're putting him in good equipment. Just the only problem is that he starts fourth, so he's got all the place differential in the world to lose, and then you're making him start at the very back, so he's going to have to work his way forward. There is no upside whatsoever. So don't go galaxy brain thinking that I'll play Justin Allgaier, because he's got a salary on both FanDuel and DraftKings now. They've both given him a salary, 6,300, 6,400 on the respective sites. I mean, you get that for a guy in Hendrick equipment, that's great, but there is just I know I said this about Chris Bell. There is just no way for Allgaier to be a complementary piece of your rosters because of what he's going to have to do in this race tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, starting in fourth and then like starting in the rear and being scored from fourth is a huge disadvantage.
Yeah.
He's cheap, so maybe there's some merit to playing him, but we'll talk about him more in the sleeper section, I suppose here. So let's see. We have from the poll pretty good name here, and Joey Logano, Kurt Busch second, um, Alex Bowman third. I mean, there's going to be a lot of competition for who's going to lead this race, it looks like, because, like usual, we have the top 12 drivers starting in the top 12. So, how does that affect your strategy for this weekend? Because, I mean, Logano starting at first. You're talking about how Indy is a track that's hard to pass. So, is he going to be your go to guy to lead off your lineups?
Yeah, more than likely, because I mean, you're putting a driver who's already a really good restarter or just starter in general. You're giving him the preferred groove. Now, Kurt Busch, every time that he restarted on Sunday, when he was up front, he started in the non-preferred groove and he was able to take the lead. And that didn't just happen against Austin Dillon; it happened against Ryan Blaney. But the mere fact is that you've got Logano in that preferred groove. He should be able to, as I always say, he should be able to sail away and knock off a bunch of laps led and probably fastest laps, since he'll have the clean air to his advantage. Now, before yesterday and the news came out, I really liked Logano because, I mean, you have to go back. You look behind them. You've got Bowman. You would have had Johnson. Then you have to go back to Almirola and Hamlin in the third row to find somebody who I really consider as a threat to lead laps. So I thought there's enough of a cushion there that Logano will get some separation between himself and Hamlin or Kyle Busch, Brad, Chase, Kevin. But now that Jimmy's out of the race, Allgaier's in his vehicle, falling to the rear, this is gonna move up Hamlin to where Johnson would have started. So now you've got Hamlin being scored from sixth, but basically starting in that second row. So it hurts Logano's chances, but the fact is that Logano's good enough that he can get out to the lead. Put a second lead on Kurt, Bowman, Eric, Denny, whoever by the second or third lap, and just sit on that lead. And his salary, it's really attractive. 9,200 on DraftKings, 12,500 on FanDuel. That especially on DraftKings, that allows you to do other things besides just roster a single dominator in your lineups.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting price tag at 9,200 on DraftKings for Logano, because you got to have him as one of the top, projected plays of the day. You do get a $2,300 discount from Christopher Bell. But so we got some other guys here that have way better odds to win though. So Logano is about 12 to 1 to win. Harvick is about 5 to 1, and Hamlin is about 5.5 to 1. If you look at the sports books, and I mean those aren't perfect, but they do represent to some extent how fast they expect these cars to be. So we got Harvick starting at 11th. Now, for a guy like Harvick, that's kind of like a sweet spot where you get a little bit of place differential upside. You don't expect him to lead the first stage, but after stage one, he should be as likely as anybody. So, what do you make of these odds? First of all, that Harvick is such a big favorite, as well as Hamlin, and how are you going to approach picking these guys?
Well, yeah, when I first started going through the field, it was either Hamlin or Harvick were the guys that immediately jumped off to me, especially when I put together the race sheets with the starting grid. Because I mean, these guys come in with the best form. If we're looking at Pocono as your corollary, the closest thing that we have to Indianapolis, I mean, these are the guys that they finished second and first apiece last weekend at Pocono. Denny's coming in with great form. I mean, we're talking about 2 wins, a second and a fourth ever since Homestead. Now before Pocono, Harvick had been so, but I mean Harvick, he ran really really well last week at Pocono. The If it wasn't going to be Logano in a lineup, it was going to be some combination of Denny and Harvick, or the two for me on DraftKings or FanDuel. I mean, these numbers for these guys, they just stand out and they look so good. I'd love to add Kyle Busch into that discussion, but we need to see something from Kyle. More importantly, we probably need to see practice from Kyle at a track before we can seriously consider him as a threat to lead laps and win at these tracks.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at these guys' performance, there's no way you pick Kyle Busch because just at the bottom line is that Kyle this season has been averaging 31 fantasy points per race. Harvick's been averaging 58, and 58 is about what it's a little bit more than I expected this week because there are not that many laps, but still, he's my top projected driver for the week by a decent margin. Um, Now, I think you mentioned the practice. I know they had practice yesterday for the Xfinity road race, so that was a source of useful information for today. Now, for these Cup races, are they still continuing to go without practice, or will we have some data?
Eventually, maybe someday we'll have practice, but NASCAR seems to be in a pretty good groove about not doing practice, and quite frankly, I don't think the drivers are complaining about not having access to practice. The loudest critic right now might be Kyle Busch because he absolutely needs it to get his car set up. Meanwhile, Hamlin and Harvick are just they're loading off of the hauler, ready to race.
Yeah, and the numbers really are clear here. So this year, Hamlin has been averaging the second most fantasy points in the field of 51. And then the next highest is at 45 with Keselowski. Kyle Busch is way down the list, like 15th or so.
Mm-hmm.
So, man, he's been having a rough year. So it sounds like Kyle Busch is kind of in your doghouse. Would that be kind of how you're approaching him?
Well, ever since I had seen the comment that he made about needing practice, I've really kind of just X'd him out of my player pool. Like, I'm pretty sure I went way too overboard with my Kyle exposure at Homestead just because of how good he had been. Figured that something had to click. I mean, something had to give, and it didn't click. It definitely didn't. It definitely didn't show up in his results. Now, the one caveat that we have to make about Kyle is that since Pocono is the corollary to Indianapolis, perhaps running all of those laps, last weekend at Pocono will give him an idea of what he needs to do at Indianapolis. But the other way that you can look at that was Saturday just a giant practice session for Sunday? Because he was improved, he was running better on Sunday before Ryan Blaney wrecked him out. So, did he pick up anything tangible for those two races at Pocono that he can bring to Indianapolis? If he did, then you may have something on your hands. And it's not like DraftKings or FanDuel is trying to price Kyle out of reach or trying to price him according to just his track history at Indianapolis. They made him pretty fair. I mean, we're talking 13,000 on FanDuel, 10,400 on DraftKings. So I mean, that is still a fair price for Kyle and his talent, but the mere fact that you have to pay $300 more on DraftKings for Kyle than you do have to for Denny, I mean, that's a no-brainer at this point right now.
Let me throw out some numbers that might make you reconsider this here, because I mean, DraftKings Sportsbook has a lot of matchup props right now, and these are a lot more valuable as far as information than odds to win because they allow you to bet both sides. Now, Kyle Busch they have at plus 108 versus Kevin Harvick minus 139 to have the better finishing position. Now, Kyle Busch is minus 109. Denny Hamlin is minus 118 to have the best finishing position between those two. So Hamlin's just a tiny favorite over Kyle Busch to finish the race ahead of him. Harvick is, it looks like maybe a 55% to 45% chance according to these odds. Now, what that tells me is like if the ratio of Kyle Busch's ownership is a lot different than that, which I expect it will be, uh, then he's a great DFS play. I mean, not someone that you'd expect to go out there and beat Kevin Harvick, but the odds are good that he will.
Mm-hmm.
So, do those sportsbook odds kind of make you feel better about Kyle Busch?
Yeah, it's nice to hear that those numbers are so close. That the DraftKings sportsbook, it's not like a gigantic chasm between himself and Hamlin or himself and Harvick.
All right, guys. So if you want some of these contrarian picks to come through, like Kyle Busch, make sure to click the thumbs up here. That'll help us get some good luck. Hopefully this week, not 20 people will finish tied for first. So that's what I'm always hoping for. But yeah, I feel like you can't read the odds completely as like gospel, but there is a lot of sharp money coming in depending on the market. So,
mm-hmm.
And there's also competition between these books. So Kyle Busch, he has the third best odds right now to win the Big Machine 400, and that seems it's kind of setting off my contrarian radar here because I feel like people are sick of losing their money picking this guy. So,
yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of the other dominator potential guys because these guys might kind of go under the radar with Harvick and Hamlin and Busch being kind of such large favorites. Let's start with Chase Elliott. He's a starting 10th. He's very expensive this week, only $300 less than Kevin Harvick, and his odds are about 15 to 1 to win the race, depending on the book. Now, that is about 1/3 of the chance of Kevin Harvick. So, like for a $300 difference, you got to think no one's going to play Chase Elliott this week, right? So, what do you make of that?
Yeah, Chase is in this weird spot. You've already talked about the salary. How, I mean, it's more than Kyle, it's more than Denny. It's just a hair shorter than what you're paying for Harvick. And if you look at his recent numbers at Indianapolis, I mean, it's so a 9th, a 15th, and then a 39th back in that crazy 2017 race. And if you combine Pocono in Indianapolis over the past 2 years, you've got 5 races, two top 5 finishes, 3 top 10s, and then everything else was outside of the top 20. Last weekend at Pocono, a 25th and a 4th. So I mean, he was kind of here and he was kind of there. I think he just started too far back. As you remember, he started in 25th place on Sunday. So he was, perhaps just a little too far back for his own good to really make a charge against the likes of Harvick and Hamlin. But you're going to get him at lower ownership because of the salary and because of the numbers. And we know that Chase is fully capable of fighting his way to the lead. And like I mentioned, if you can't pass somebody on the track, you need to pass them on pit road. And Chase has one of the best pit teams, so he can definitely pick up a few spots here and there throughout the race via pit stops.
Nice. Yeah, I have a lot of interest in Chase Elliott because he's kind of like the quintessential pay up to be contrarian play this week, where it's like objectively not as good a play as several other guys like Logano, who's the pole sitter, Harvick, and Hamlin, who have a lot better odds. But he's like really expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So my theory here, like, and you can use some of the tools on the website, like the Top Drivers tool, right, to kind of help you with this analysis. But so I have him as a 10% chance to be one of the top 2 dominators. And what that means is that I'm kind of assuming that if a guy is a dominator, they're going to have a good finishing position too. I mean, sometimes they're going to crash at the end of the race. Yeah. Nothing you can do about it. In fact, that happened to Chase not too long ago. Yeah. So in that 10% of times, he's going to have a monster score. And I'm hoping that the ownership won't be that high so that you can kind of get that correlation between domination points and finishing points on the low end guy. My experience with NASCAR has been like, you kind of just throw 2 darts at the really high priced guys and just hope that they have their day.
Yeah.
So is that going to be your strategy this week? Or I know you mentioned you like single dominators at this kind of racetrack.
Yeah, on DraftKings, salaries are so fair that you can do a duel, or heck, if you want to, you can go after 3 dominators. Now, once again, there's only 160 laps, so I mean, there's not that many dominator points to go around. But essentially, DraftKings is not stopping you from going Logano, Harvick, Hamlin, fill out the last 3 spots, and you're probably going to get access to every lap led and every fastest lap. If you want to go, I haven't messed around with a single dominator build just because the salaries get really wonky because you're almost too balanced with your drivers on a single dominator build. But I played around with 2 lap leaders on DraftKings, and I mean, it's so easy. It's so easy to do. In fact, you can do the same thing on FanDuel. In the article yesterday, I wrote that it would probably just be a single dominator build, but then I started messing around with stuff today, and crap, you can go 2 lap leaders on FanDuel just the same, because FanDuel infinitely always gives us way too much value on the bottom
end. Nice. Yeah, so those 0.1 per lap slot at FanDuel, it kind of makes a difference between a guy finishing like it kind of makes up for some of the placement differential points. So you do often need those guys that lead the laps, even though they don't reward as many points for that.
Yeah.
But if you do go single dominator, I gotta think that Christopher Bell might sneak in your lineup because, I mean, objectively, I think he's a bad play. He's 11.5K. I mean, we know he's not a Kevin Harvick or Kyle Busch, so like that's just like a lot to pay for him. The reason why is because he's starting in 35th. Now, that means on average he's going to have a good fantasy score, but he's just really hard to cram in your lineup in a sport where you pretty much need you want to spend all your salary because you can't get the top 6 scoring drivers in your lineup on a weekly basis because of the salary constraints, and no one's salary caps you harder than Christopher Bell. So, I mean, like, I don't think I might have a lot. I might have like 5 to 10% because I don't think he's a good value, but he could sneak in the winning lineup. What do you make of Christopher Bell this week?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to go single dominator build, then you almost kind of force yourself to play Christopher Bell just to fill out the salary. And I thought there was no way that Bell could be optimal, but I mean, he ended up doing it last Saturday. He did exactly what he needed to do. He needed to get into the top 5, pick up those 30 place differential points, finish in the high 30s with finishing points, and all that got you was about 6K for your fantasy points versus salary. But when Eric Almirola at his price ends up being a dominator, then everything works out. So once again, if you're going to play Christopher Bell, you need a top 5 finish out of him at 11,500. His Xfinity results here over the past couple of years, they were so nothing to make you think that he's really going to kind of excel at this track. I ran my my model for the SuperDraft article this morning, and I've got Bell finishing around 19th. So I mean, on SuperDraft and FanDuel, that's doable. But 11,500 for a 19th, 18th place finish out of Christopher Bell, that's just it's not going to work.
Yeah, so on DraftKings, kind of tough to stomach that price tag. On FanDuel and SuperDraft, you mentioned much easier to get to. Now, on SuperDraft, they have the multiplier system. So instead of a salary cap, you get a multiple of the fantasy points. His is 1.55 compared to the top guys, which are 1 to 1.15. And I have to think that he's definitely a top play on SuperDraft. So is he just going to be a staple of your lineups on SuperDraft this week?
Yeah, it it is incredibly tough to envision a way where Bell, if everyone's going to play him at flex. I mean, that's just deal with it. He's going to be the ultimate chalk, and he's probably going to be the ultimate chalk in the champion selection with a 2.35x multiplier. If he goes from 35th to 19th, doesn't lead a single lap, then we're talking 52 super draft points. But when you add in the flex multiplier, now he's got 80.6 fantasy points. When you use him as a champion selection, well, now we're talking 122.2 super draft points. It's going to be really tough for anybody to outproduce that. I mean, we've got, if Ryan Preece, who starts behind him, who has a better multiplier, finishes higher than him, then that's possible. But we have to say, on apples to apple comparison, that Bell is always going to have the higher ceiling than Preece because of talent and because of equipment. You could possibly see it out of William Byron, but you need Byron to win the race, and you could also see it out of Clint Bowyer, but you have to have a top 5, top 3 finish out of Bowyer for that to happen. So just on the surface, if Bell picks up those 16 place differential spots, he's going to have a really good day. And if he does anything better than that, then nobody is going to surpass his champion score on SuperDraft.
Yeah, I mean, that multiplier really makes a big difference. Now, SuperDraft is a good opportunity to the strategy is a lot different. So if you dedicate some time to learning it there, it can definitely reap some rewards. Because I know there's some guys out there like me that aren't trying as hard as I possibly could. So I think 1 week I just picked up every guy starting 30th or lower at Talladega, and I lost every single lineup. So I think it's interesting because they give points for the laps finish, and then you get a multiplier. So it's basically bonus points for these higher multiplier guys, and that's the interesting dynamic. Now, for finishing position, I have Christopher Bell almost exactly the same as you, 18.4. So that placement differential is gonna really, on average, pick you up a lot of points. Now, the reason I don't love him on DraftKings, and you can use the tools on the site to figure this out yourself, is that his standard deviation is a lot lower than the other high price guys because he does get all those points from the placement differential. So he's at 19, where, for example, Kyle Busch is at 27. So while Christopher Bell's going to have a higher score on average than some of these other guys, his upside is a little bit lower. And I think that's obvious given that he's not a leading candidate to win this week. So let's talk about some of the other guys that are really good picks depending on the week, but this week might not stand out as much. So I'm going to start with Kurt Busch, number 2. Kurt is his odds aren't that great this week to win. He is at about 30 to 1, and starting 2, that gives him a lot of downside. But if he can get past Logano at the start of the race, that could equal a big fantasy performance. So he's kind of a tough decision this week. What do you make of Kurt Busch?
Yeah, on FanDuel, I don't think you go near him because him starting second. But on DraftKings, 7,500 for Kurt. So it's really weird that Eric Jones finally got bumped up to where he should be, but Kurt Busch took about $1,000 nosedive compared to where he should be. So 7,500, we're lowering the threshold for what you need for Kurt. we've talked about this earlier. Kurt, he likes starting in the non-preferred groove. It's something weird, but he takes advantage of it, and he can find his way to the lead. If he can beat Joey, no small task, then he'll have the clean air and he'll be able to pick up some fastest laps. The only issue with Kurt is how much place differential will he eventually lose throughout the race, and how much of that offsets what he could possibly gain through fast laps and laps led. Since he's 7,500, we're lowering what we need from him. So, what precisely do you need from Kurt to be of value of that day? We're talking, if we're just talking 5x, then we're talking 35 points. If you want 6, we're kind of in the 40 range. So, if Kurt were to just kind of hang around the top 5 all day because of the track's nature, then I mean he could sneakily find his way into the optimal lineup, especially if he can gain some fastest laps, perhaps lead a few laps here and there. He could sneak his way into the optimal and really surprise a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't think that's that unlikely. And I mean, that $7,500 price tag, I'm not sure he's going to be like contrarian tomorrow. Still waiting to crunch the numbers for ownership, but I do have him at a 16% chance of being one of the highest scorers. And at his price point, highest 6 scorers, I should say, because there's 6 lineup spots on DraftKings. At his price point, if he does reach that upside, you're going to need him for sure. Now, we got Alex Bowman in 3rd, Eric Almirola in 5th. These guys, their odds aren't great this week, and I think they might be sneaky because it's not like that number 2 spot where it kind of stands out a little bit more to lead laps. And they're not big favorites to win the race. So as far as like a optimal lineup play, you don't think you'd land on Bowman or Almirola, but how do you feel about them for GPPs?
Bowman, I'm not seeing it. This really isn't his sort of track. We played him last Sunday because he had all of that place differential potential, and it worked out. He finished 9th. His previous 2 races here were driving for Hendrick, 21st and 33rd. So I mean, I really don't think that this long flat venue plays into what Bowman really likes to do. Now Almirola, in past years, I just would have given you the nod wave and said let's move on. But I mean, Almirola has been so good of late; it's crazy. His finishes here at Indy, 14th, 23rd, and 13th, which is so. That 13th was from the Wreckfield race, I believe, when he was still racing for Richard Petty. But if we look at what Almirola has done himself since Homestead, we're talking a 5th, a 3rd, a 3rd, and a 5th. So he's definitely got momentum on his side. He ran really well at the corollary track in Pocono last week. One was on the pole, and the other one was him starting in the teens. So we know he's got a fast car. We know he's got a good setup coming into the race, and he's kind of in that same boat that Busch is for me. At 7,400 on DraftKings, it's just a question of what do you need for him to be optimal. Because if drivers are not going to pass, like if you look throughout the field and look at these guys with place differential potential, that if they don't move up the field and get 5 to 10 spots, we're talking about a Matt Kenseth if you're feeling crazy. Moving down, we're talking about your Ty Dillons, and really that 7,000 range is a strange and odd range for lineups because you don't see a lot of guys in that range that are going to be chalky. Like if I'm looking here at all of the guys in the race sheets that I highlighted as cash plays, and I'm looking for $7,000 plays, 7K range on DraftKings, I'm seeing Kenseth, and that's it. Everybody else is either above it or below it, which generally means that most people aren't going to find their way on Almirola. So if you can get Almirola at crazy ownership for a guy that could possibly stick around the top five, maybe knock down some fastest laps. I kind of doubt his ability to lead laps, but gaining a few fastest laps here and there while retaining his position definitely isn't out of the question.
I think you mentioned an important fact here is that Almirola really had a great weekend last weekend. And at the price point as well, you mentioned there's a kind of lack of good options. So I have a feeling Almirola could be sneaky popular this week. And I mean, when you look at the downside, maybe that leads me to think that I'm going to fade him. But we'll see how that plays out. Let's talk about some value plays because obviously we need these guys to complete our lineups. You mentioned the 7K price range is pretty unappealing. And I think the most popular one has been Michael McDowell, but he's starting 27th this week. That didn't stop him from being incredibly popular last Sunday, though. So, do you think he'll continue to be kind of that go-to value play everyone's going to go to?
Because of the random draw, I think that people are going to just pay up $100 and get 10 more place differential positions with Ryan Priest. Priest will undoubtedly be the value chalk play on DraftKings, and quite frankly, he should do the same on FanDuel and SuperDraft. You are getting a lot of place differential. He finished he finished 16th in this race last year. I've got him finishing either 20th or 21st according to my SuperDraft model. So I mean, you're definitely getting 10 plus place differential, maybe even more out of Priest at a really favorable number. Now, you could combine McDowell and Priest if you're trying to grab up three high price guys together, but I imagine most people aren't going to double dip below that range. So they'll probably end up with more Priest than they do McDowell. But I mean, crap, McDowell's been so good lately. McDowell may actually have the higher ceiling than Priest at this point.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to look at. I think that Priest, he definitely stands out as kind of the guy that does the obvious value play pretty much no matter who you are. Like if you're just looking at the entry screen to build, or if you're looking at the speed of the cars and everything, like he's just the superior play to everyone below him. So he's going to be an obvious play this week. Now, another guy I'm really looking at, we got some good guys in this range ahead of him too. We got Cole Custer starting 30th. He's got room to move up a good amount. Ross Chastain starting 32nd, though, is standing out a lot too. Now, I think that at 6,400, he's kind of a premier value play this week. What are you doing with Chastain?
Chastain's back in, I believe, in the 77 without Chip Ganassi alliances this week. So this is the 77 that we're accustomed to seeing with those other drivers that won't have any technical support from Ganassi. Starting 32nd, you're getting a comparable driver, but for 6,400. I just don't know why you just don't go play Cole Custer. Crap, I think I would even play Daniel Suarez over Chastain this weekend. Suarez is finally at a favorable number. Thank you, DraftKings. He's back down to 6,100. Suarez, you know what you're going to get from Suarez. He's going to advance past all of the rest of these guys in bad equipment. He'll possibly hang on to the lead lap. If nothing else, he'll be the first guy a lap down. And he'll just kind of be hanging around. If this were a attrition short track, then I would be a lot higher on Suarez because he's kind of fought his way through these attrition tracks, but there shouldn't be a lot of attrition to tomorrow. But I mean, you're getting the driver starting 37th for 6,100 who should pick up 10 10 spots at a minimum. That seems fair. I'd play him across all platforms. As far as Chastain, I just don't think I trust that equipment that he's in this weekend.
I think that's important to point out because if you're just looking at Chastain's numbers, I mean, he does look like a pretty good play. Now, a lot of people might not factor that into their projections, so he may be overowned compared to his potential. So that's definitely something I'm going to be looking into more after the show because clearly, maybe my intuition about this wasn't that great. So I'll have to reevaluate this situation. Buster does look like a strong play at that price point. So as you see now that I'm looking at the odds, that Custer is at about 300 to 1 and Chastain's at 750 to 1. So Custer does look like a much better play when you look at that.
Yeah, and I think that DraftKings number is going to play on people's minds because the last time that we saw Chastain in the field, was that the Coke 600 race? Whatever the last race that Chastain was in when he was driving the 77, he was priced up to like $6,700 or $6,800. So I mean, if you're seeing Chastain and from the season that you've seen Chastain racing for Roush, you've seen the technical alliance with Chip Ganassi, you're just going to assume based on this price that he's in good equipment without understanding that DraftKings baked everything that he's done this year into this price.
Yeah, that's definitely. I mean, that's a factor in NASCAR that doesn't really exist in other sports because it's like you're not just getting the guy, you're getting the whole team and the equipment. So
right,
that's why it helps to really pay attention to what car they're driving, who the sponsor is. Especially, we see that a lot in the Xfinity truck. It's like if they don't have a sponsor that week, it's like just like X them out.
Yep.
All right, so we got Daniel Suarez. I'm not sold on, but 37th place. You can't argue with that. Now, man, one guy that I kind of am scared of rostering, but I think I might is BJ McLeod. He was horrible last weekend at Pocono, and I think he's kind of like a self-funded team or something. So kind of a different situation. Usually his car stinks, but it's been a lot better than Timmy Hill, Josh Bilicki, Gase, Smithley, and to a lesser extent Yaley and Hoof. So, like, is it totally ridiculous to pick BJ McLeod starting in 40th here?
Oh man, I I don't think I can do that. I really don't think I can do that. Bilicki, he kind of intrigues me. Like, and I really wonder what the mentality of people is going to be because he's in the Xfinity road course race today. He's got some road course racing chops. He's probably going to do fairly well and end up being in the optimal lineup. And he's starting 39th. He's got a fair bit of place differential to pick up for for a punt. But he finished 34th and 32nd last week. You look at Timmy Hill, he's starting 38th, and last week he finished 29th and 35th. God, with all of these guys, it's let me have a couple of shares, but never go too overboard.
Yeah, certainly. So I definitely like. I'm kind of intrigued in the next range. Guys like Corey LaJoy. We mentioned Michael McDowell, but John Hunter Nemechek. And the reason why is because this is a 2.5-mile course, and the speed is comparable to a 1.5-mile course. So the conclusion I'm drawing here is that a lot of these guys are more likely to be at the lead lap at the end of the race because it just takes longer to make a lap.
Right.
So I'm thinking that if they're on the lead lap, then maybe there's a shakeup at the end and they just kind of luck box into a decent finish. So how likely do you think that would be for a guy like LaJoy?
If we see a race like last year, fairly green. There will be some wrecks going into the corners. Then, it's probably not that likely. But if we have a race like 2017, then I mean, all bets are off. I mean, anything could literally happen. Like, I do believe in that race back in 2017. Yeah, Timmy Hill finished 14th. Timmy Hill just kind of kept trudging along, fighting along, and eventually made his way into a top 15 finish. You want to hear something crazy, and this kind of blew my mind when I was looking at this. Let's just say Timmy Hill starting 38th. I've got him projected finishing 33rd according to my model. Remember, on SuperDraft, just for the flex play for a bottom guy like him, you get 2x, and then for your champ, for these bottom guys, you get 3x. If Timmy Hill finishes 33rd, we're talking 59.5 fantasy points as a flex play. Now, there's going to be a bunch of guys that outscore him, but as just a off the wall, throw it against there to see if it sticks, and this race gets kind of out of control, it wouldn't be the craziest thing for Hill to to be up there in the flex play. Not a guy that if you're building a single lineup that you're going to go after. But yeah, I think if you start using these guys on DraftKings priced below the Ryan Preece area, then you're kind of hoping for just random wrecks to keep occurring where they can just steadily keep moving their way up through the race.
Yeah. So if there are a lot of cautions, and this bottom range, they really don't have a great shot of being able to lead the laps. So that's kind of why I was like, maybe like LaJoy. If you look at the Vegas odds, it's like the same, but LaJoy is average about 97.5% of the average top speed, while Timmy Hill's at 94.5. So that's like more than twice as far from the leaders. Now LaJoy was in the optimal last week, so I'm kind of thinking that people might not. They might pick him this week, so that kind of leads me to maybe. Well, I mean, Nemechek's in 19th starting, so that's kind of unappealing.
Well, on to be square, 31st place, which is a much better starting position for LaJoy than we've had the past couple of weeks, because this random draw keeps shooting him into the mid 20s, and he finished 23rd and 21st last week at Pocono. So I mean, the place differential upside is there. Last year in this race for Go Fast Racing, when it was worse equipment, he finished 19th. So the 10 spot that I was talking about, trying to get at least 10 place differential spots out of your cash play. I mean, yeah, for 5,500, if you can't get to Ryan Preece because of what you've done with your lineup, and you can just get to Corey LaJoy, that works.
Yeah, I think that he's on the table, but not. You gotta kind of like justify it like pretty hard. So maybe go into Preece just makes so much more sense. But you never know. All right, guys. So one of the things about NASCAR, of course, you need all 6 of your drivers to finish the race. So I see right now we have 30 likes and 85 people watching live. So if you don't click that like button, you're not going to have any lineups finish 6 out of 6 finishing the race. I got to strong arm some folks here. So, all right. Let's talk about the guys that we glossed over. So the first guy I'll mention is Keselowski. He has a price of 9,800, which is good, but not great. His odds to win are really good though. He's at like 8-1, 9-1, and the fact that we didn't talk about him for 50 minutes makes me think maybe he'll go under the radar. So he seems like a good dominator at dart throw to me. How do you feel about Keselowski?
Yeah. In fact, all of the Penske drivers should be guys that are in your pool for potential lap leaders. Penske has had something figured out here at Indianapolis, whether we're talking about NASCAR or Indy. He's had definite success here. You go back 2 years ago, Brad won the race. 3 years ago to that wreck field race, he finished second. Last year, his results were pretty disappointing. He finished 38th, but he got taken out in the corner by Eric Jones. I mean, Eric just he found him, and then you might remember this wreck where Brad came across the track, was going to hit that portion of the wall where it first sticks out, I believe, on the back stretch, but then they've got some tires there, and Brad actually ended up on his side. It was really odd. So throw that out. That wasn't his fault. Before that, a first and a second place finish. He's run well here. Yeah, his laps led of late, they've been definitely on the downturn. So perhaps you're not going to get that great amount of dominator points out of Brad, but could Brad just potentially win? Even with him starting ninth and having 8 place differential points to add to his total on DraftKings for a 9,800, that's a really good price in the guy that should be in your pool.
Nice. Yeah, I think a good strategy is to kind of take one of these dominators that isn't as popular and pair them with one of the more popular ones. So that's going to be one way to differentiate for me. I'll throw in Martin Truex into the same group as Brad because his odds to win for the name Martin Truex aren't very good, and he's been kind of struggling a little bit. But he's got that name brand, so I don't know exactly what to make of it. How are you handling Truex?
Yeah, I've been wondering about Martin myself. We saw him, lead a bunch of laps at Atlanta, ended up finishing third. He came back that following Wednesday at Martinsville, ended up winning the race. But since then, it's been kind of so-so. I mean, we are talking about a 12th, a 24th, a 6th, and then a 10th last week at Pocono. His numbers here at Indianapolis, they're kind of so-so. Let me look at the last 10 races page. Going back the last 10 races at Indianapolis. 18th, 36th, 8th. Hold on. Yep, sorry, looking at the wrong guy. 27th, 40th, 33rd, 8th, 4th, 25th, 11th, 8th, 24th, 26th. I mean, no wins, a couple of top 10s in there, and then everything else is just kind of mediocre. I wonder if Martin's suffering from the same problem that Kyle is, where he needs some practice time. He needs something tangible to give to his crew chief. Because remember, this isn't Cole Pern that he's worked with forever. This is a new guy. He needs something tangible to be able to pass on to that crew chief to help set up the car going into the race. And like Kyle, they're having to use the actual first segment to help get things dialed in for the race. This hasn't been a strong track for Kyle. Not for Kyle, but for Martin, and probably in the majority of my lineups, I'm not going to touch Martin as a potential lap leader.
Nice. Yeah, I see in the chat we got Bill's best one saying Truex is a 1.5 mile track guy. So I think I might take some dart throws on him just because, I think he might go under the radar a little bit. There's a lot of variance in NASCAR, but as you mentioned, there's a lot of reasons to feel negatively about him this week. Let's do a lightning round because we got several guys to talk about, but only a few minutes. So Boyer and Byron, I think they're a really solid price and starting position at 22 and 18. So I think you can just plug and play them if you have the money. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, absolutely love Boyer this week. Whatever format you're playing, whatever site you're playing, his salary is fair. He has a great multiplier on SuperDraft. Great history at Indianapolis. Ran pretty well at Pocono last week. That should transfer over into this race. In fact, practically all of the Stewart-Haas cars ran well at Pocono last week, so that should probably transfer. William Byron, fourth place finish at this track last year. I do believe that he won at Indianapolis a couple years ago when he was still in the Xfinity series. Yeah, these are guys that the ceiling is a top 5 finish, but the floor is at least a 12th to an 8th place finish.
Nice. Stenhouse starting 24th. Does a good starting position, 7,200. He's kind of the guy I think you can play a lot. Are you gonna have Stenhouse?
Stenhouse is a tale of two cities. If you look at his past 3 years at Indianapolis, we are looking at a guy who is averaging negative 6.2 DraftKings points because of a 31st, a 34th, and a 35th place finish. But, you go back to last week at Pocono, 15th and 17th. So, can he keep his nose clean? Can he pick up 7 to 8 spots? He's a little probably more than you want to pay on DraftKings at 7,200. But I mean, as a floor play, yeah, that's good.
All right, and then I got a handful of guys that are probably going to move backwards. So this would be GPP only. D Benedetto at 15, Austin Dillon at 16, Busch at 20, Kenseth at 21, and Tyler Reddick at 13, and Bubba Wallace at 17. These guys aren't going to be really. Oh, and then Ryan Newman at 14, Nemechek at 19. So all these guys I mentioned, I think they're going to be really low owned because the prices aren't great, and you got to project them to finish below where they're starting on average. So between those guys, any one of them standing out.
Numbers wise, it's Matty D, but Lord, that $8,300 price tag, that's a little much. He did finish 19th and 14th last week at Pocono, and this is a track that Penske runs good. The Wood Brothers, his 21 car, it's associated with Penske, so perhaps part of that setup will transfer into what Matt's running. Yeah. Other than that, Newman, it's laughable that Newman's $5,900. Newman, you are hoping that he stays put. He blocks everybody behind him and nobody moves past him. It's kind of the same thing that you're hoping for Austin Dillon. Matt's really the only guy out of all of those oddly priced dudes that I could see moving up, but it's just a hair.
Yeah, so a lot of guys that maybe you can X out this week, but maybe throw them in a couple of lineups if they're going to be contrarian. So, all right, guys, thank you for tuning in. Thanks, SuperDraft, for sponsoring the show. Make sure to throw in some NASCAR lineups there tomorrow. Phil, any final thoughts for tomorrow's race?
Be prepared for some green flag runs. That's all I'm gonna say. Be prepared, for a fairly green race. And remember, the race is going to be on NBC, either NBC or NBCSN, one of the two. So be prepared for Dale Jr. and Jeff Burton to try to make this race as exciting as possible. But it's probably gonna be very very uneventful and remind you of Pocono last weekend.
All right, guys. So if you're breaking down the crashes, maybe don't build that way. My final thoughts: just make sure to follow the standard DFS logic, where you want 4 really solid picks and a couple of guys that might be a little bit sneakier that are lower percentage plays, but get you that chance of a solo first. So that kind of optimizes your chance of having a good lineup that cashes and also a great one that they can have a big score. So, all right, guys, good luck tomorrow and happy 4th of July weekend.